Hello and good afternoon, everybody. It's episode 59 of Kopi Chats with me, Waylene, your host. I never ever have any Kopi when I say that we're going to have Kopi Chat, but today I actually have got some tea. I already had coffee today, but it is my intention in the future to always have coffee when enjoying a session talking to everyone. And I invite you to join me. This is not my original idea. I ripped it off from Scott Adams, my favorite political commentator and cartoonist. So, there's nothing else to talk about today except Ukraine. Now, let us begin. In case you didn't know, war has begun. You can see it everywhere. On the South China Morning Post, Putin starts military operation in Ukraine with strikes on major cities. On Channel News Asia, Russian forces invade Ukraine with strikes on major cities. Sirens sound in Kiev, shelling hits Ukrainian military units. Russia launches full-scale invasion. Latest reactions and developments after Russian President Putin orders military operation in Ukraine. US allies respond to unjustified attack by Russia on Ukraine. On Nikkei Asia, Russia attacks Ukraine as defiant Putin warns US, NATO. Biden slams unjustified attack as Moscow claims no intent to occupy neighbor. So on and so on and so on. However, and that's just the mainstream news in Asia that I wanted to highlight. But there's nothing better than going straight to the source. Now, you don't have to trust RT. RT is a Russian news outlet, but if you believe, as I do, that you won't get the full story from one side, you have to see it from both sides, then it is mandatory, basically, to at least consider the other side of the argument, which is what we see here. Let's begin. Putin announces special operation in Donbass. The special military operation is aimed at the defense of the newly recognized republics of Donetsk and Lugansk. So just less than 2 days ago, President Putin recognized the People's Republic, the Donetsk People's Republic, as well as the Lugansk People's Republics. And following on from that, he ordered his troops to conduct peacekeeping operations in both of these new states. And now he's gone one step further, ordering his country's military to conduct what he calls a special military operation in Donbass region, after the leaders of the breakaway republics asked Moscow for military assistance in what they claim is an increase in Ukrainian aggression. So I reckon that the perspectives of the leaders of the Lugansk People's Republic and Donetsk and Lugansk, I'm just going to say, the wishes and the decisions of the people and the leaders of these two states, I'm just going to refer to them as states. It doesn't mean that I recognize them. I have not given my formal diplomatic recognition to these two states. But clearly their voices do not, in my opinion, have not been well represented in the news that we normally read. So you have to go elsewhere for that, which is what takes us here. Following on. Circumstances require us to take decisive and immediate action, the order reads. The People's Republics of Donbass turn to Russia with a request for help. In this regard, in accordance with so on and so forth, I have decided to conduct a special military operation. At the same time, Russian president said he wanted to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. According to him, we have no plans to occupy Ukrainian territory. Within moments of the speech, a series of explosions were reported in cities across Ukraine, with CNN, CBC, and a number of Ukrainian media outlets reporting a blast in the capital, Kiev. In a statement, U.S. President Joe Biden said the prayers of the world are with the people of Ukraine tonight as they suffer an unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. I believe this statement is a tweet, which I will now just check for you. Two hours ago, this was the statement, I believe. Is that correct? Let's see. The prayers of the world are of the people of Ukraine tonight as they suffer an unprovoked and unjustified attack by the Russian military forces. There we go. I condemn this unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. So this was 2 hours ago, posted 2 hours ago. A more cynical person than I made the comment that you couldn't tell if this was actually said by Joe Biden himself or if it was one of his team tweeting it in the wee hours of the morning because the president was asleep in bed. And the same cynical person remarked like, if it was Trump, he would be front and center of the television speaking to the public. And I found that, love him or hate him, I find that assessment difficult to argue against. Donald Trump would have been in front of the TV, would have been making a powerful speech, whichever way that he chose to take it. And it does appear that this is a bit marked departure. Instead of facing the cameras and making a powerful statement, in opening moments of this new war, President Biden's probably asleep. I mean, this is a pretty milquetoast, regular statement, in the middle of the night. Could be from anybody. Okay, moving on. So, this is what RT reports. It's a special operation. It's intended to be limited in scope. They will not occupy Ukrainian territory, and that does not come across at all, right? Doesn't seem to come across at all. Unjustified attack by Russia, on Ukraine, and so on and so forth. The only reference you get to the other side is this: Moscow claims no intent to occupy neighbor. And granted, one may say, oh, well, it's just the headlines meant to grab your attention. You're supposed to click in to read more. Yes, I agree with that. But look at this. This headline doesn't make it seem, like the end of the world. So it seems to me like news looks a little fake. Not to say that there isn't a military action going on. Nobody, intelligent is saying that. Here, also on RT, full-scale invasion of Ukraine underway. The country's top diplomat has called on the international community for support. Russia has launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Kiev's foreign minister has declared. Interesting, isn't it? So if you would not expect just typically to see this messaging appear on RT, but yet it does. But while on the other side, the South China Morning Post, the Channel News Asia, the Nikkei Asia, you do not see, the other side of the story, which is what the Russian perspective of it is. Anyway, so we move on. Kiev's foreign minister says that it's a full-scale invasion, and accused the Russian president of attacking his country and called for international assistance. Peaceful Ukrainian cities are under strikes. This is a war of aggression. Ukraine will defend itself and will win. The world can and must stop Putin. The time to act is now. His comments came after Putin signed a decree authorizing the use of military force following a request for support from the leaders of the Donetsk and Lugansk regions. So, are you confused yet? Because I think it begins to, as you read this, it becomes very clear that there's some context that is not being stated. Like, why does Putin talk about demilitarizing and denazifying Ukraine? Why do the media not give any attention to what the people of Lugansk and Donetsk want, what they say about this, how many people have been killed? So it seems like these valid questions we're not being told these relevant pieces of information. Okay, I wanted to just check something else. Let me see. Is there a search? I believe so. Never mind. So, moving on. This early in the conflict, you can't really... news is coming in from everywhere. So I want to show you what I found, and even in the past few hours. I can't vouch for the sources of these videos, but it does appear that things are going on, things are going down. There's more. Over on the Russians with Attitude Twitter account, which is run by 2 Russians. I think they're great guys, and they've been reporting on this issue for some time now. They tweeted, Ukraine and the West are conducting an organized operation as part of a large-scale information attack against the Donetsk People's Republic. Pushilin, who is the DPR's leader, told RIA News the website of the DPR suffered a DDoS attack on Wednesday, and YouTube and Instagram deleted its accounts. So it is fairly remarkable that it seems that the Donetsk People's Republic is having a hard time, maintaining even an online presence, getting people to listen to them. So that is quite a bit of a mystery for me. They also tweet here, Zelensky is currently addressing the nation in Russian, and this was 6:50 a.m. would be about 9 hours ago, middle of the night, speaking in Russian. Of course, he speaks Russian because most people in Ukraine speak Russian, but they also speak Ukrainian. This, at the time, was President Zelensky of Ukraine's last-ditch effort to get the support of Russians in Russia. Obviously, it would not. There's a great chance that it won't be carried by Russian broadcasters, but he did make a broadcast. He said that TikTokers and mothers need to hear his message, that his message won't be shown on Russian TV. Do Russians want war? According to the Russian with Attitude guys, he didn't really say anything, just that he wants to return to negotiations with Russia. Didn't offer anything, didn't address any of the sore points, I believe. And so they conclude this was extremely weak. I think millions of people are going WTF across all of Ukraine right now. And I want to show you the timeline of the Russians with Attitude, because you can actually see when they realized that war was starting. See, up to over here, 8 hours ago, somebody asked, do you think it's actually going to happen tonight? To which they replied, I'm not sure, but the chances have never been this good before. Shortly thereafter, reporters are saying that the city of Kharkov in Ukraine has no electricity. We're at war, by the way. Carlin was right. Carlin must be a friend of his, maybe a fellow content creator. More news tomorrow. Literally was just awoken by girlfriend to be told we're at war. I don't know anything at all. What the actual fuck? This was 2 hours ago. Oh no, 12:48 p.m. February 24th. Oh, yes, literally 2 hours or so ago. Carlin and Nimitz were right. We were fucking wrong. Wow. So Russians with Attitude initially thought that it was not going to happen, but then it did. And here they post some videos. I'll show you some of them. Paratroopers landing in Kharkov, where the electricity was cut off. Paratroopers on their way down. From what I hear, the Russian Air Force destroyed the entire Ukrainian air defense system on the first approach. There are literally no targets left for the second approach. Somebody commented, look, Ukraine won't last more than a couple of days. And the Russians with Attitude think that it's more likely to be hours. And yeah, about 2 hours ago, they posted, man, I don't even know what to tell you. It looks like the entire Ukrainian military just disintegrated immediately on contact. From what I'm seeing, Ukraine doesn't have an air force, air defense, or fleet anymore. And I've seen a little bit of video about that as well. There are rumors of Russian special forces looking for members of the Azov battalion, but just rumors. The Azov battalion apparently are Ukraine's version of special forces. And they are, of course, well-trained, very effective, and so Russian special forces would be looking for them to neutralize them before they can do any damage. Certainly. They tweet also, Donetsk artillery hit the headquarters of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Joint Force Operation in Donbass. So the structure is now burning. That feels like might have been a lucky hit, because how lucky do you have to get to hit the command building? Reported. Oh, here's a good tweet. Reportedly, this is Chairman of the Ukrainian Parliament, Ruslan Stefanchuk, packing his things and driving off into the sunset. Calls to mind the former president of Afghanistan, whose name I cannot even remember as well, who was reportedly stuffing his bags with millions in dollars and flying away from Kabul before the Taliban took over. Bear in mind, I'm not saying any of this is good or just, only that it is happening, and that the reporting we hear is not comprehensive. It doesn't cover the whole story. So if we want to understand it, it behooves us to look into it a little bit more, which is what I'm trying to do. The State Emergency Service of Ukraine announces the headquarters for the National Guard was destroyed. The Russian Ministry of Defense announces Ukrainian border guards are not offering any resistance to Russian troops. Also, the Russian Defense Ministry, the military infrastructure of the air bases of Ukraine have been liquidated, so no more air force. Russian Ministry of Defense clarifies Ukrainian border guards not resisting, Ukrainian air bases and air defense all gone, neutralized. 1 hour ago, there is panic in Kiev. Representatives of the Ukrainian government are leaving, to which I would not be surprised. Another video showing helicopters over Lugansk flying westward, and of course, westward is the direction of the conflict. So it's the the theater of action. And here is the video showing an airport hit, an airbase for Ukrainian Air Force. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that they've been neutralized, and you can see allegedly a strike on one of the air bases. And it sounds like the people are speaking Russian. Might just be. Lugansk claims that the Ukrainian military across the contact line are refusing on a mass scale to carry out orders from the command and are leaving their positions. Totally demoralized. Hearing reports that the Romanian Air Force intercepted and forced a Ukrainian jet to land. Apparently it was deserting and entered Romanian airspace, but this is unconfirmed for now. Ukrainian troops encircled and surrendered near Lugansk. Tank group destroyed south of Donetsk. So it looks like things are going exceedingly smoothly for Russia, with parts of the Ukrainian military giving up wholesale, not offering any resistance. So much so that Donetsk People's Republic spokesman Edward Basurin claims that the Azov Battalion and other Ukraine National Guard forces are blocking civilians from leaving Mariupol, which must be one of the cities, because, well, clearly that would make it that much easier for Russian forces to take over. Now it looks like there's an update saying, oh, this must be Romanian, that a jet was flying towards Romania and intercepted, fleeing the battle. Terrible. Now, check this out. This is, I gotta admit, it's always cool watching military hardware. As a regular guy, I always find myself fascinated by military hardware, and I'm sure many people are, including yourselves, dear viewers. I'm sure many of you, not all, but many of you would be. Russian surface-to-air missile systems driving through Kherson, I guess, Oblast. Russian rockets fired from Belgorod. Check that out.
Бать сверкает.
Isn't it remarkable that there doesn't seem to be much about fighting, just a lot about say movements and actions? It seems like there might not actually be that much fighting. check this out. The place that was hit, this tweet says, the place that it hit in Kiev was the headquarters of the Ukrainian Information and Psychological Operations. So the PsyOps headquarters are down. Donetsk say that have encircled the 53rd Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Army, offering a humanitarian corridor on condition of them surrendering weapons. The Donetsk defense spokesman says those who want to surrender will be spared. Russian Ministry of Defense says intelligence data shows Ukrainian army units and servicemen leaving their positions en masse, dropping their weapons, and that the positions of the Ukrainian army units that surrender are not being attacked, which would seem to line up well with what we're seeing here, because we have not actually come across any tweets about mass casualties, heavy fighting. It's notable by the absence. Brings to mind there's this old Sherlock Holmes story. I think it's called the Hound of the Baskervilles, and the notable thing, the way that Sherlock solved the crime, was by noting that the dog of the house did not bark when the killer was said to have entered, thus concluding that the absence of the barking was the key, meaning that the dog knew the person entering was not a stranger, and thus applying the similar thinking here. It appears odd that you would expect there to be heavy fighting, but there isn't. That's conspicuous, because of its absence. All right, moving on. Here is reporting from a reporter actually on the ground in Ukraine, Trey Yingst.
Benjamin Hall with the U.S. response. He's at the State Department. But first, Trey Yingst live in Kiev with more from the Ukrainian capital. Trey, hello.
Bill, good morning. Overnight, President Putin ordered Russian troops into separatist-held areas of eastern Ukraine. Military equipment was rolling through the streets of Donetsk and Luhansk shortly after the Russian leader signed 2 decrees recognizing the independence of these self-proclaimed breakaway republics. This is being spun as a peacekeeping mission by the Russians, but make no mistake, this is a coordinated invasion into Ukrainian territory. Violence continues to erupt along the line of contact today, but now could expand with direct fighting between Russia and Ukraine,
which ultimately did not appear to pan out because the Ukrainian army seemed to just give up. Later on, there were some further updates. Look, this was 18 hours ago. A more up-to-date, here you go. 2 hours ago, air raid sirens in Kiev as Russian attacks begin. You don't actually observe any explosions, any destruction, but the air raid sirens are on. Here you go. Let's check this out. And now Trey Yingst started wearing his helmet for protection because it is just really risky now.
Full-scale Russian invasion into Ukraine happening right now, and the air raid sirens going off in the Ukrainian capital as we speak. Shannon.
All right, Trey Yingst doing an amazing job there, reporting around the clock for us.
Make no mistake.
There you go. So let's see. Now this has not escaped the notice of the Chinese Foreign Ministry, who have tweeted. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has tweeted, it's unwise for certain people to compare the Taiwan question with the Ukraine issue. Taiwan has always been an inalienable part of China's territory. The One China principle is universally recognized in international relations, and Taiwan independence only leads to a dead end. If you're a cynic or you're a realist about the world, I think the conclusion is inescapable that this issue is being raised because it looks to China that the United States is extremely unlikely to interfere in this issue. So they feel confident enough to assert their position, test the waters, see what the response from Taiwan's greatest ally, United States, will look like. And I think it's not an exaggeration to say that this looks really bad from the United States perspective, at least for the government, the United States government. I make a distinction between what the government wants to achieve and perhaps what the people actually believe. Because from where I stand, what I see on Twitter, there's no enthusiasm for fighting a war in Ukraine. There's zero enthusiasm, despite President Biden's, continued, let's say, statements. His calls to resist Russia, calling Russia out, telling them, not to, that they absolutely must not take any, aggressive action, or else the consequences will be severe. They've already implemented sanctions, but sanctions were not even 2 days old before Russia decided, forget about that. I'm just going to move in, and they did. Now at this point, and you can see that the weakness of the U.S. government position is just making it more palatable for say Chinese Foreign Ministry to reassert their position on Taiwan, and for President Putin to move into Ukraine, whatever his intentions may be. Obviously, to everyone concerned, this looks like a massive crisis, because this seems like a fairly large scale military operation with no, or without sufficient mitigating circumstances. There always are mitigating circumstances, and I think right now it will be sensible to take a moment to look into it just a little bit. And I just want to show you, you've probably not seen this, but there's plenty of public information about I'm going to call it the Luhansk People's Republic now. Here you go. Luhansk People's Republic is on Wikipedia, and you can browse briefly the history of the Luhansk People's Republic. Self-proclaimed, and you can see that there's a bit of history here. Majority of the population speak Russian as their first language. Ukrainian national elections, remarkably stable pattern developed, where Donbass and the western Ukrainian regions voted for opposite candidates since the presidential election in 1994. Viktor Yanukovych, a Donetsk native, had been elected as president in 2010, but he was overthrown in 2014 Ukrainian Revolution. I think it was called the Maidan, and you may have heard of that, because I recall hearing that word, even though I didn't know the details, and that apparently did drive a wedge between the people of Ukraine. Some people in Donetsk supported Viktor Yanukovych, and people in the Donbass? No, the western regions did not, and that just heightened mutual suspicion and conflict. And you can see here, there was occupation of government buildings. They declared, their independence. Later on, there was an attempt to bring an end to the war, culminating what was called the Minsk Agreement, held in the city of Minsk, signed in the city of Minsk in Belarus, to bring all the parties together, Luhansk, Donetsk, Russia, and the Ukrainian government, to bring solve the problems that they had. Obviously, I think it's super clear that the people of Donetsk and Luhansk, they have their grievances, which is why they did not accept, the outcome of these elections and rule of the Ukrainian central government. Look, there's plenty of violence here. The Luhansk defense minister was killed in a car bomb. Separatists claim Ukrainian secret services were behind it, and so on. So this is not exactly a peaceful region. It's got a lot of troubles. And this has always been simmering, right, since at least 2010, if we're just going by what is stated here. Same goes for Donetsk, because they have had they have went through much of the same, and they were also involved in the Minsk Agreements 1 and 2. So none of this, though, is actually covered in the mainstream media. No consideration is given to the desires of these people. We're just simply told that Vladimir Putin wants to invade. He gave an excuse, and he did. And there's a similar story behind what's going on in the Crimea, which is the region that we were told, Vladimir Putin invaded. Okay, I mean, I have no way of verifying that. So with all this, this is just a little bit of context. There's plenty of stuff to read, but I won't bore you with all those details. But I do want to point out that, did you know that the Kremlin has an English language website? Check this out. Here it is. Kremlin at kremlin.ru. You can actually read transcripts, and the most recent one is an address by the president of the Russian Federation. And who else but Vladimir Putin? And it's a fairly lengthy statement, of course. This was from the 21st, which was 3 days ago now, and you get a bit of insight into his thinking about what is going on, why it is important, what is the relationship between Ukraine and Russia for all this time. So he goes from touching on what Ukraine was from the 1700s until communist times, and you can, from reading this, I've skimmed it briefly, and it's clear that he's no fan of the Soviet regime. He was born in Soviet Russia, but he is not a fan of Soviet Russia. His criticism is harsh, calling some of the decisions stupid, which is not something you see very often in presidential statements. So he has strong feelings about that, and that has to factor into his thinking. And depending on how you view history, this would be very useful to understand. And it turns out that Russia has always had a lot of difficulty with Ukraine, at least for years. Here, let's take a quick read here. It should be noted that Ukraine never actually had stable traditions of real statehood. In 1991, it opted for mindlessly emulating foreign models which have no relation to history or Ukrainian realities. Political government institutions were readjusted many times to the rapidly growing clans and their self-serving interests, which had nothing to do with the interests of the Ukrainian people. Essentially, the so-called pro-Western civilizational choice made by the oligarchic Ukrainian authorities was not and is not aimed at creating better conditions in the interest of people's well-being, but at keeping the billions of dollars that the oligarchs have stolen from the Ukrainians and are holding in their accounts in Western banks, which while reverently accommodating the geopolitical rivals of Russia. So that's a big claim, and a note that we never hear anything about. We always hear about evil Russian oligarchs, but never about evil Ukrainian oligarchs. But it is obvious that every country has its oligarchs. If you have been following the stories about Joe Biden and his prodigal son Hunter Biden, you will know that it's proven, it's clear the case that Hunter Biden was hired to be on the board of a Ukrainian energy company, paid a monthly salary, which was I think an eye-watering amount, something, I don't know, was it 50,000 a month? Might have been 50,000 a month. I don't think it's $500,000. I don't think it's 500,000. I think it was 50,000 a month, which was very generous, and very generous for somebody who has zero experience in the energy industry. So, and I recall that during the Obama administration, Joe Biden's portfolio, the things that he's working on, included Ukraine. So for a long time, from years ago, Ukraine was something that he had taken an interest in. So, as this conflict plays itself out, note that there are many things which we have blind spots for. We don't know things that we don't know, such as why Joe Biden is so interested in Ukraine, in particular, why President Putin is so interested in Ukraine, like besides the historical reasons. Nobody talks about the gas, the natural gas, the pipe. Nobody explained clearly what it is about the pipelines. There are some, like President Putin does here, some vague allusion to oligarchs in Ukraine, but no names being named. I feel like were they to start revealing information, perhaps it might spiral out of control, with tit for tat revelations, and it would all just be very embarrassing. It's possible. It does feel like there's a lot of stuff that is not revealed to the public. But feel free to peruse this information. It's, as I said, on kremlin.ru. Very interesting read, and gives a lot of historical background, which you do not get, if you're just reading the South China Morning Post, Nikkei Asia, Channel News Asia. It just doesn't exist. Instead, we'll be getting some commentary that doesn't really amount to much commentary at all. Okay, now there is one thing I want to spend a bit of time on. I heard this excellent analysis about Russia's decision to do peacekeeping in the Ukraine and a parallel that exists with the Kosovo War. Now, if you are an oldie like me, you may recall that there's a place called Kosovo where an armed conflict took place starting 1998 until 1999. You may have heard the words Albania, Serbia, and Kosovo. And what you may not know was that it was launched, the justification given for NATO military action. Now, NATO conducted a intense air campaign to fight I believe the Serbian forces in order to support the Kosovo Liberation Army. Now, what happened? The story goes that I heard was that Albanians had been migrating to Kosovo for many decades, and there was plenty of tensions. Kosovo was part of Serbia, but eventually, the people wanted to secede. They wanted to leave the country and form their own country because maybe they were not satisfied with the government. Maybe I'm sorry, I don't recall the actual reasons, but it happened, and then they started fighting to secede. Of course, the Serbian government resisted and fought the separatists. Now, at this point, NATO stepped in on behalf of the Kosovo Liberation Army, and conducted an intense, aerial campaign to fight the Serbian army. Serbian forces. Now, bear in mind that Serbia in this story occupies the same position as the Ukraine. So there are some forces that want to carve out a piece of territory and make it independent, and that was Kosovo. In today's conflict in the Ukraine, it would be Donetsk and Luhansk. Now, what happened was NATO supported the people who wanted to break away, and it supported them through a aerial campaign. The justification given was that it is a humanitarian war. We're fighting, for humanitarian reasons. That was the given justification, which in my understanding was not a justification that was used before. It was a new justification that did not exist prior to that. Now, Vladimir Putin's justification is the same. He's using the same justification for his actions this time around, saying, well, the people of Luhansk and Donetsk requested help from Russia, and we cannot turn away from this. So for humanitarian reasons, we're going to help them because they are suffering. So he is using the reasoning, the rationale that was applied to Kosovo in Ukraine. The same reasoning that NATO, his opponents in this current conflict used before. He is using the enemy's own justifications, own rationale against them. And this is frankly a stroke of genius. It actually is, because if he conducts this operation and he's opposed by NATO, well, obviously he can just throw this in their faces and say, you did exactly the same thing. Why is it okay when you do it and not okay when I do it? To which there is no answer. There is actually no answer to that. Now, that doesn't make it right, but it is good strategy, and I think that deserves to be stated. Maybe what happened in Kosovo was a mistake, or maybe is correct, and this is correct as well. But nonetheless, we cannot support, this action, right? Because you wouldn't support it because people will die, right? But maybe you will negotiate. Either way, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. And there has been absolutely no mention of it anywhere. So, hey, everybody, take note. You heard it here first, right? The rationale given, same thing. Now, if anybody wants to talk to you about the Ukraine conflict, mention the Kosovo war. And I guarantee you'll be like top 5%, top 2% armchair critics of this war. Nobody else will have it. So congratulations to you. And here it says on a Wikipedia article, I'll just go on very briefly. The NATO bombing campaign has remained controversial. It did not gain the approval of the UN Security Council, and it caused at least 488 Yugoslav civilian deaths, including substantial numbers of Kosovar refugees. Yes. Of course it's controversial because the justification given was not a thing in the past. Right? It was a new justification, if I'm not mistaken, that is. Yeah, reported in Endgame Kosovo. So, and this is important because, even for international relations, people, legal scholars, lawyers, well, if you're going to make a legal argument, let's say you want to get the United Nations Security Council involved, well, you have to make a legal argument about it, right? People care about what legal precedent, they care about the process, processes, forms, functions, processes, treaties, and so all of these things come into play. So if this was okay before, surely it's okay now because precedent has been set, right? Or if it's not, there has to be a justification for it. But the kind of rhetoric and the arguments that are put forward to us are so juvenile, so insulting even, that you can't really take it seriously. So there you go, guys. You may not have to, you don't have to support either party in this absurd conflict because I think the best case would be to sort this out by diplomacy. But failing that, it should not be long drawn out. I think we can all agree with that. And there are things that affect us, right, personally, and we would want to have our voice heard, but this does not. This is not one of those things. I would much rather leave it, to the people involved, the leaders of Ukraine, Russia, any country that, is nearby and has a, big stake there, perhaps Germany and so on, to sort out their differences. I think we would support that kind of action. Yeah. But it's absurd, maximum absurd to expect that, we would just be given scraps of information to whet our appetite to, build support for whatever justification, whatever kind of terrible things that will be done, to increase loss of life. That would be unacceptable. And I would advocate, I think even when we talk to other people, we should be advocating against that. All right. I think that's all I'm going to talk about for today, because this is such a huge issue that nothing else compares, nothing else stands out really. And that's all I want to say about it for today. I'll be following the topic continuously, mostly on Twitter, because I think that's where the latest updates come in. And if there's anything interesting, any new perspectives consider, I'll be sure to share it with you. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care and bye-bye.